stress. What is it? Where does it come from? Is it something that we can control? How do you know if you have it? Recently in Forbes Health, they brought out some shocking statistics. 37% of U.S. adults report being unable to do anything when they are stressed. And around 27% of U.S. adults report feeling so stressed that they can't function on most days. In today's episode, I want to take a deep dive into a silent toxin that is causing people not only emotional concerns, but it's beginning to develop tons of physical problems in people's bodies. We're going to talk about stress. So in my prologue, I had shared some key factors that I know really contributed to the cancer diagnosis that I received back in 2019. One major concern, of course, was my nutrition and my diet. But the other one that I didn't realize until years down the road actually was equally detrimental to my health, and it was stress. And if you recall, in my previous prologue episodes, I spoke to some of the really outlandish and traumatic, if you will, events that took place in my life over the course of a couple of years that caused high levels of stress. And it was after those events and after the dust kind of settled that suddenly I found myself with a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. What I didn't realize, it was the combination of nutrition and stress that was creating the perfect storm for disease in my body. So, it wasn't until a couple of years after my cancer diagnosis that I began to really question, my diet is really good. My nutrition is on point. I'm getting enough physical activity. How is it that things aren't reversing? Why am I not seeing a complete healing of my body? And it was at that time that I really started to research and take a look at all the external factors. I was looking at toxins and chemicals, and surely all those things were contributing factors. But what I discovered overwhelmingly is that I was living at an 8 to 10 stress level on a daily basis. A lot of that was due to my job. After really just being at home and taking about a year to very intentionally rest and take some time to heal, I felt so much better. And it was in that time that my tumor had shrunk by 75%. So I felt good, and it was time to kind of get back to work, right? So I re-entered back into education, started teaching again, found myself in a very challenging environment, one more challenging than I had ever been before. I was no longer a band director. I was no longer an administrator. I actually moved into teaching first grade. And 6 and 7-year-olds are not for the faint of heart. I have a child who is that age, and I thought, hey, I get it. I know how these kids are. It's going to be fine. But nothing could have prepared me for what I walked into with 20 students who were all over the place. Physically, cognitively, emotionally, and every one of them was so precious, but at the same time, they were not what I would call teachable. And it was my job to get them acclimated into the system, help them discover how to read and write. That was the goal for the year. This brought on a ton of stress. Given my past history, I've always been very performance-based. So I really was expecting to see leaps and bounds of improvement. I was wanting to see these kids just flourish and, begin reading and getting excited about learning. But kids are kids. And I had this beautiful picture in my mind of what it should look like. And it never looked anything like that. It was beautiful in its own way, but it never looked the way I expected it. And I really began to carry that weight on my shoulders day in and day out, dealing with the problems that they were bringing from home, dealing with the different issues, the learning disabilities, all the different emotional stresses that were going on in their lives. I was taking them on. And then really kind of going against the current, teaching kids who really just want to play. They don't want to be taught. And so really trying to find that balance started to weigh on me significantly. And about 3 or 4 months into this new job, I began to feel that recurring pain in my neck that I had had at the onset of my diagnosis. And immediately it caused concern for me. So I doubled up on my therapies. I really started making sure I was taking lots of supplements and like trying to really take care of my body, but it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And so I wasn't understanding at the moment the severity of the stress I was under. In fact, I didn't even think I was under stress. And I started questioning, how is it that I'm feeling worse? Because my nutrition's on point, and I kind of chalked it up to like, well, I'm not sleeping as much as I need to. So I'll try to be more, careful about guarding my sleep and guarding my rest. And so I did that, but it wouldn't go away. And by about April, things were getting so bad that I really felt so much inflammation in my body that I had to go to my principal and say, I've got to take some days off to try to recover. And what I discovered was that I would take maybe 2 or 3 days off in a row to recover, and I would start feeling better. All of the inflammation would reside, things would be getting better, and then I would go back to work for 1 to 2 days, and boom, it would come crashing down on me again. And it was at this time that I started to realize there's something more to my journey than just my nutrition, because my nutrition's on point. But the problem was I was still dealing with the chronic symptoms. So it was at that time that I really started to dive in and study the effects of stress and understand how stress works. So let's back up. Let's take a look at what stress is and what it does to your body. So let's talk about biology. When you feel stress, your body releases hormones that trigger a fight or flight response to prepare you for action. So this is actually a biological process, and these changes include things like your heart rate. Adrenaline begins to flow through your body and makes your heart beat faster. It also affects your blood pressure, because that adrenaline and the narrowed blood vessels cause your blood pressure to increase, right? Because the idea is that you're in survival mode and you need that oomph of energy, that burst of energy to get your body to function, to get you out of danger. Blood sugar. Cortisol is also another hormone that's released. And so that cortisol goes into the body and it begins to increase the amount of glucose in your bloodstream. Your muscles and your muscle strength is affected. They tense up and begin to prepare for action. Your mental activity becomes very acute. Your brain's use of glucose increases and your body produces more substances to repair tissues. Your immune system, this is where things get crazy. It actually begins to weaken because it's not part of the survival process. So you're more likely to get sick or worsen conditions when you have stress because that immune system is neglected. Your digestive system, same thing. Your cortisol slows down the function of the digestive system because it's not necessary if you're trying to save your life. So basically digestion sort of shuts down, and that leads to some more chronic issues, maybe like indigestion or heartburn or other stomach issues. So what happens is this physiological process causes all kinds of issues with our body if it is not released quickly. Stress is important because it's what protects us. Let's give this example. Let's say you're walking in the woods down a trail, you're enjoying a lovely hike, but suddenly a large predator, maybe a bear, comes out on the trail in front of you. Immediately your body goes into fight or flight mode. You're either going to run and hide or you're going to fight that bear. I don't suggest the latter. And so your body doesn't know the difference in stress. It just knows it has to prepare for survival. So whether you are being chased by a bear or whether emotionally you're becoming stressed out because your job is so demanding of you and the pressure is so high, your body doesn't read the difference. Your body just responds. So in the example of the bear, You're going to get away, you're going to be safe, and then the body's going to return to normal function. But when you have a job that takes your stress level this high on a daily basis over and over and over, then what happens is you're never really recovering. And that's when we start to see a breakdown in the systems in the body. So for example, acute stress can cause the heart to beat faster, increase the blood pressure, and redirect blood to larger muscles. That's a good thing. But chronic stress, day after day, the same fight or flight mode, it can activate the sympathetic nervous system, which can lead to increased levels of stress hormones like cortisol and epinephrine. Your respiratory system gets affected as well. Stress can cause you to breathe faster and open small airways in your lungs to take in more oxygen, and that extra oxygen is what increases your alertness and your sharpness and your senses. But then if we have too much oxidation in our body and we never release it, then we start dealing with oxidative stress. The digestive system, stress can change your digestive process and reduce your intestine's ability to absorb nutrients from food. That's okay in the hour-long ordeal of being chased by a bear, but it's not okay if every day you're at a high level of stress, and when you eat lunch, even though you're eating healthy food, your body cannot absorb it because you're so upset and stressed out that your digestive system has already shut down. This leads to things like stomach pain, bloating, nausea, diarrhea. The list goes on. We've already mentioned the immune system. Cortisol can change your immune system responses. It also can affect the reproductive system. Obviously, that's not a primary function of fight or flight. So chronic stress affects the reproductive system. In men, it can decrease testosterone levels. It can also, in women, change their menstrual cycle. So these physiological problems are very prominent. So all of this understanding and all of this research had me take a step back and say, wait a minute, I am getting myself to a point where I am so stressed out on my day-to-day job that my body is starting to shut down. The inflammation is rising. My immune system is suppressed. I'm not feeling well. I'm chronically fatigued. I feel overwhelmed. I'm eating really well, but clearly I'm not getting the nutrition that I need. So I really started to go on this journey. And, part of what we talk about on the Healing Conspiracy is about you seeking truth. And everyone has a different journey in healing. This is my journey. But what I discovered is, the funny thing about stress is we never know exactly how our body's going to respond until it happens. And then mitigating these effects is really dependent upon the environment that we've created for ourselves. So I had to take a step back and say, why am I so stressed out? These are just kids and I'm just trying to help them. Yeah, I want them to do well, but I shouldn't become overwhelmed. And what I started to discover was really more of an emotional and spiritual problem in my life. I discovered that I had this deep-rooted need to prove myself professionally. And because I was struggling to get these kids to learn what I wanted them to learn, I began to feel like a failure. And that is what was causing me stress. It wasn't the students. It wasn't necessarily even the environment. It was the weight that I was putting on myself. So I had to take a step back and really, turn 180 degrees. I had to repent of really those feelings and those thoughts because I realized I'm dealing with some selfishness here. I'm dealing with this whole host of emotions that's causing me stress because I want to prove myself. I want to be considered for a promotion. I want, people to come in and say, you're doing a great job. We want you to help others. I wanted that acknowledgement. But at the end of the day, my job wasn't to get acknowledgement. My job was to help students. And I had to reframe and reshape where I was going with my career. It was in this time that I started to uncover and realize as I looked back at all the things I had been through, that it wasn't just nutrition that was causing me trouble. It was this constant stress in my life, whether it was the circumstances of my previous story when we moved and we dealt with so many factors and stressors, or, the culmination of now me trying to find stability again. I began to realize the common thread was stress. And I now understand that stress is just as, if not more toxic than any other factor in my life. The question is, how do we heal from stress? Or are we just doomed to be stressed out? I've heard so many people say, my life is just so stressful. But does it have to be that way? I said a moment ago that mitigating the effects of this stress, it really depends on the environment that we create for ourselves. And since we don't always know how we will respond to stress, I think it is important that we are proactive in building an environment and a lifestyle for ourselves that when stress comes, because it's going to, but when it comes, we have built up, if you will, like this bank to draw from, that we know how to heal from it. I think, first of all, it is important to look nutritionally. So let's talk about how do we create an environment that we can truly mitigate stress and heal from stress without dipping into the effects of chronic stress. So let's make it our goal to create an environment that really prepares our minds, our bodies, our spirit to thrive in stress rather than suffer the aftermath. Let's start by looking nutritionally. What could be done nutritionally to really make sure that our bodies are ready to receive stress when it comes and not suffer the aftermath of that onslaught of excess hormones and excess chemicals in our body? There are many supplements that can help with stress, okay? The key things that you want to be looking for are things like adaptogens, vitamins, and minerals. So adaptogens, what they do is they interact with your body's hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, okay? And that's a really fancy way of saying that basically we have these systems and the adaptogens start to interact with those systems and it triggers the stress response to help the body adapt. So some examples of this would be ashwagandha and rhodiola. These are both adaptogenic herbs that might help reduce cortisol levels and improve stress resilience. Ashwagandha has long been touted as the go-to adaptogen, right? And I have used ashwagandha, and I do feel that it does strengthen me. However, there is one that I have found personally that works even better, and it is called Tulsi, and it is commonly called holy basil. And I have never taken an adaptogen that is quite as noticeable and powerful as this. And the way I liken it is, if I take a couple of capsules of the holy basil and you don't feel anything, it's not like I get in this weird, state of mind or anything. I mean, I just feel absolutely normal. But the difference is this: when I feel those stressful situations take place, and whenever I take a step back and say, this is one of those situations where my blood pressure starts to rise, where I start to get irritated or frustrated or whatever the case may be. When I've taken holy basil, what I've discovered happens is I just bypass that. And it's like I just stay regulated and I stay normal. And your mind realizes it, like you catch it and you go, normally I'm really frustrated about this, but I'm cool. This is no big deal. So I do definitely believe in adaptogens. And I think that it's worth trying some different ones to see which one helps your body react the best. Also, having proper vitamins in your body is going to really help with stress reduction and especially with brain health. So for example, vitamin B complex, that actually reduces feelings of anxiety or depression. While vitamin C, on the other hand, it helps fight oxidative stress. Vitamin D3 also improves mood and energy. So knowing these different vitamins and making sure that you're getting the proper intake primarily from food sources but of course, in some situations, you might need to supplement, then I think you can really set yourself up nutritionally to have the nutrition in your body to help all these systems work in balance. Also, it's worth talking about minerals. Minerals have the ability to help with stress management and brain function. A lot of this is about brain function because if we get overloaded, a lot of times we can't see through it and we can't think clearly and we make rash decisions, which in turn leads to more stress. So really having that cognitive sharpness is going to make a big difference. So for example, magnesium may help regulate things like serotonin and manage anxiety and even help with insomnia. There's also a component in green tea called L-theanine, and it actually promotes relaxation and supports healthy cognition and attention. So personally, I'm getting to where I'm drinking green tea on a daily basis because it also helps fight cancer. So there's so many things that these supplements or these natural occurring herbs can do to help us. Okay, so that's nutritionally. We can set ourselves up. Hopefully, that's a few little key ideas. Maybe do some investigation on your own. But maybe those are some things that you can incorporate into your nutrition to help you. But then let's look on the physical side of things. What can we do physically on a daily, weekly basis that is going to help create an environment where we can handle stress and it doesn't overload our system? Okay, I think for sure, body movement, exercise is paramount. Having some kind of routine. And we're not talking about going to the gym and lifting heavy weight, which is not bad, but it's not for everyone, right? But it's about incorporating body movement and daily intentional exercise routines into your lifestyle. Because then whenever we have this influx of frustration or stress or whatever the case may be, our body physically is strong enough to handle this and work through the system. Also, physically, whenever we exercise, it helps us remove toxins out of our body. Being very intentional about breathing in a way that promotes health and healing. Most people do not breathe well. They breathe very high in their chest and they're not breathing low into their diaphragm. Whenever we breathe low into our diaphragm, it actually helps move our organs, stimulate our lymphatic system, and it brings so much nourishment to us. So doing things like intentional breathing are going to make a difference. Obviously, removing toxins from your environment, checking on the skincare, the beauty care products that we use, the cleaning products that we use, making sure that they're natural, making sure that it's not just all synthetic and chemically based, because those things begin to bring stress into our lives. I would also highly, highly recommend using essential oils. Essential oils are so concentrated and they have such power to help regulate our systems whenever we use them correctly. And then lastly, very unknown, somewhat controversial, I would encourage you to look into grounding. Being barefoot outside does amazing things physically to your body and helps you rid yourself of excess electricity. That's probably more for another episode. Okay, also we need to look emotionally. Creating an environment emotionally is going to be very important to help us mitigate stress. Making sure, whether you're introvert or extrovert, we all need relationships and we all need healthy community. Making sure you're getting involved in that community effort, whether it's through a church, whether it's through service projects, whether it's through, even at your job, having social activities that you do, having that community is key. Also, think about your communication. Are you storing things up inside, or are you quick to bring problems to the forefront to look for solutions? These affect the condition of how we receive stress. Making sure that you have vision and you have purpose in your life. Thinking through and saying, what are my goals for this week, for this month, for this year? What is the overarching purpose in my life that I'm trying to do that's good, that's driving me on a daily basis, that's driving me on a weekly basis? Maybe it's raising your family. Maybe it's becoming successful and a voice in your field or in your career. You have to have those visions in front of you, because without vision, you will begin to perish. And lastly, sometimes it takes removing yourself from stressful situations. For me personally, when it came to education and teaching, I have decided to completely remove myself from that situation, because I know, although I was able to identify the triggers of stress for me, and most of them had to do with my outlook, I also know that the demands on my body on a daily basis are, while I am healing, extremely rigorous, and they are not putting myself in a condition to heal well. So I've had to remove myself from that situation. It is a huge life choice. It is a huge deal. And you might find yourself in a position where you have to make some very hard decisions. But if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. Lastly, let's talk about creating a healthy spiritual environment. We have three parts. We are body, we are soul, emotions and thoughts, and we are spirit. There is a part of us that is so deep and so eternal. You know, I've come to the realization lately that my body is suffering with some issues. My mind's not. My vision's in place. My purpose is in place. I have things to do, but my body keeps struggling. And it helps me to see like there is a major difference between the physical realm that I'm dealing with and what is actually me. And I encourage you to really seek through that and find that truth for yourself. I encourage things like prayer, things like meditation. But when I say meditation, what I mean by that is diving deep into the word of God, into the Bible, into scripture, to things that are deep, and thinking on them until I get understanding, until I see how it applies to my life. I think reading the Bible and Bible memorization is fantastic. Also, it's important that you practice forgiveness, because studies and research shows that unforgiveness harbored inside of us often leads to stress, which leads to problems. And then practicing charity, right? Practicing mercy, practicing gratitude, doing affirmations, right? Thinking through the things that are good in your life and really giving to others. All of these, they all have effect, and it compounds. And if those things get out of balance, then when the stress comes, we cannot handle it. You know, I wonder if a lot of people are dealing with chronic stress, not because of their situation, but because of their environment, the environment that they've created for themselves that's toxic. They've created a toxic environment, and now when their boss asks them to do something difficult at work, they cannot handle the pressure. It's not because the task is too difficult. It's because they don't have the capacity for the task. Then that causes stress because there is an expectation to get the job done. Stress is a silent toxin, and it is one that cannot be ignored. I have found that those who are overcome by stress are those who tend to just let life happen to them, rather than designing a life of purpose. Thank you for listening to the Healing Conspiracy Podcast. This has been episode 3, Stress, the Silent Toxin. If you or someone you know has a healing story that needs to be shared, please reach out to me at chris@healingconspiracy.com. Also, you can follow me on all social media channels at Healing Conspiracy, as well as visit the Healing Conspiracy YouTube channel for exclusive content. If you're listening on KFred Radio, you can find us every Tuesday through Friday at 7:30 a.m. Pacific. Remember, seek for the truth, and it will set you free.